The storm didn't arrive slowly that night. It swallowed the entire mountain in hours. A former Navy SEAL couple had come here to disappear. After losing their unborn child, they chose a life far away from everything. In a cold, silent cave no one else wanted. For a while, it worked. Until the wind changed, and people started running toward them, desperate, freezing, out of time. But the most terrifying part wasn't the storm. It was what their dog found, deep inside that cave. A hidden door, something buried, something that shouldn't have been there, and once it opened, there was no turning back. If you want to know what they discovered, and how far they were willing to go to survive, stay with me till the end. The wind moved low across the mountain ridge, carrying the first sharp breath of winter through the pine trees and over the dark mouth of the cave. Ethan Cole stood at the entrance, one hand gripping a thick wooden beam he had just set into place. He was a man carved by years of discipline and war, tall, broad-shouldered, his posture always straight even when no one was watching. His dark hair was cut short, streaked faintly with gray at the temples, and a rough beard shadowed his jawline, giving him a permanently hardened look, a long scar traced from just below his left ear down toward his collarbone, a quiet reminder of a mission that had nearly ended him. He used to be the kind of man who could walk into chaos and bring order to it. Now he couldn't even look at his wife without feeling like he had failed her. Behind him, deeper inside the cave, Mara Cole knelt beside a small stack of supplies. She was slender, almost fragile at first glance, with pale skin that had lost its warmth over the past months. Her dark brown hair was tied loosely at the back of her neck, strands falling free around her face. Her eyes, once sharp, observant, alive, now carried a distant stillness, as if part of her had stepped away and never returned. Mara had been a Navy SEAL too. Not many women made it through that world, and even fewer came out stronger than the men beside them. She had been one of those few, precise, controlled, unbreakable. Until the hospital room, until the silence, until the moment she realized there was nothing left to save. Ethan glanced back at her, wanting to say something, anything, but the words never came. They hadn't, not for weeks. Instead, he turned back to the door. The cave they had chosen wasn't just a shelter. It was a decision, a line drawn between who they had been and whatever they were trying to become now. The entrance faced away from the prevailing wind, just like he'd calculated. The stone walls held a steady temperature, cool but stable. Inside, they had carved out sections: sleeping space, storage, a small corner where Mara had begun organizing dried herbs and supplies. It wasn't a home, but it was quiet, and quiet was all they could survive right now. A low snort echoed behind him. Atlas padded forward, his heavy paws clicking softly against the stone. The dog was a stocky bull breed, 5 years old, with a muscular frame and a broad chest that made him look almost like a small tank wrapped in short, dark fur. His coat was a deep charcoal color with faint brindle patterns, and one ear bore a small notch from an old injury. His amber eyes were always alert, always watching. He had been Ethan's partner during the last years of service, trained to track, to guard, to survive. Unlike most things in Ethan's life, Atlas had never broken. The dog moved past Ethan and sat near the entrance, staring out into the fading light. Calm, still, present. Ethan reached down, briefly resting his hand on the dog's head. "Good boy," he muttered, his voice low, rough from disuse. Atlas didn't move. He rarely did unless it mattered. Further inside, a faint bleating broke the silence. The goats. There were only 8 of them, small and mismatched. Thin, stubborn creatures they had bought from a local farmer who seemed almost relieved to be rid of them. They weren't impressive animals. Patchy coats, uneven horns, restless movements, but they were alive, and they gave milk. And in the cold months ahead, they would give heat. Mara had insisted on them, not because it made logical sense, though it did, but because she needed something to care for. Something that depended on her. Ethan had understood that without asking. He had stopped asking about a lot of things. He stepped back inside, pulling the heavy wooden door toward him. It scraped slightly against the stone floor, a deep, grounded sound. He adjusted the beam, locking it into place. For a moment, everything was still, the kind of stillness that didn't come from peace, but from absence. No traffic, no voices, no machines. Just breath, stone, and the faint shifting of animals in the dark. Mara stood slowly, brushing dust from her hands. She walked toward the small opening in the cave where faint light from outside still reached the floor. For a few seconds she just stood there, looking out toward the distant line of trees on the frozen edge of the lake below. Ethan watched her carefully, waiting. She didn't cry, not this time. That somehow hurt more. "You think it'll hold?" she asked quietly, her voice calm but distant, as if she were asking about something that didn't truly matter. Ethan followed her gaze toward the door. "It'll hold," he said. "Wind won't get through that." She nodded, but didn't respond. Outside, the temperature was already dropping. He could feel it in the air pressure and the way the wind moved differently along the rock. A storm would come. Not today. Maybe not tomorrow. But soon. He had learned to read those signs long before this place. Mara turned away and moved deeper into the cave toward the goats. One of them nudged her hand gently, and she rested her fingers against its head, her expression softening just slightly. That was new. That was something. Ethan exhaled slowly. Maybe this place would work. Maybe. Atlas moved. Not abruptly, not loudly, but enough. The dog's head snapped toward the deeper part of the cave, the narrow passage they had ignored since the first day. A tight, uneven crack in the rock that led into darkness. They had checked it briefly. Solid, dead end, nothing worth worrying about. Atlas stood up slowly, muscles tightening beneath his coat. A low growl rolled through his chest. Not aggressive, not loud, but focused. Ethan's entire body reacted instantly. The old instincts never really left. His posture shifted, shoulders tightening, eyes locking onto the same direction. "Mara," he said quietly. She froze. The goats shifted uneasily, their movements growing restless, hooves scraping softly against stone. Atlas took a step forward, then another. He stopped at the edge of the narrow passage, staring into the darkness. The cave felt different now, tighter, heavier, like something had changed without making a sound. Ethan reached for the flashlight hanging at his belt, his fingers closing around it. He clicked it on. A thin beam of light cut into the darkness. Stone, dust, nothing. Atlas didn't move. The growl deepened. And then, from somewhere beyond the reach of the light, a faint sound, soft, slow, metal dragging against rock. Ethan didn't breathe. Mara's voice came from behind him, barely above a whisper. "Ethan?" He didn't answer. Because for the first time since they had arrived, he wasn't sure what they had walked into. Ethan didn't mention the sound. Not that night. Not the next morning. Not even when Atlas refused to leave the mouth of the narrow passage. Sitting there like a carved statue, muscles tight beneath his dark coat, eyes fixed on the same patch of darkness as if it were breathing back at him. Instead, Ethan worked. He always worked when something felt wrong. By the third morning, the cave had begun to change shape under his hands. He reinforced the ceiling with angled timber supports, widened the sleeping area, and carved shallow trenches along the floor to redirect moisture. His movements were efficient, precise, every action measured, every decision calculated. It was how he had survived war. It was how he was trying to survive this. Mara watched him from across the cave. She didn't ask about the passage, but she noticed everything. Mara Cole had always been observant, sharp in ways most people never realized. She was tall and lean, her posture straight even when exhaustion pulled at her shoulders. Her dark brown hair was tied loosely, strands falling across her pale face. There was a quiet stillness in her now, a kind of emotional restraint that hadn't existed before the hospital. Before everything broke. She had learned to live in silence, but she hadn't stopped seeing. The goats had settled into the rhythm of the cave. 8 of them. Thin, uneven, stubborn creatures that seemed more alive than anything else in that space. One in particular stayed close to Mara, a small, pale doe with a crooked front leg and soft, alert eyes. Mara called her Luna. Quietly at first, then out loud. The name didn't feel as heavy as she had expected. Outside, the valley was beginning to whisper. Word had spread about them, the former soldiers living inside a mountain. Some came out of curiosity, others out of disbelief. Most didn't stay long, but one did. Ethan saw him before the man even reached the clearing. An older figure moving steadily uphill with the kind of patience that only came from years of hard living. He was tall, but slightly bent at the shoulders, his movements careful, but not weak. A thick gray beard framed his weathered face, and his pale blue eyes carried a quiet sharpness that missed very little. He stopped at a distance. "I'm Walter Hayes," he called. "Been living down this ridge longer than most folks remember." His voice was calm. Grounded. Not a threat. Ethan approached slowly, his stance relaxed but ready. "You came a long way for a visit," he said. Walter gave a faint smile. Came to see if the rumors were as strange as they sounded. He glanced past Ethan toward the cave. "Mind if I look?" Ethan hesitated, then nodded once. Inside, Mara straightened as they entered. Her gaze moved immediately to Walter, studying him without fear, but without trust either. Walter removed his hat. Ma'am. She gave a small nod, nothing more. Walter walked slowly through the cave, his boots crunching lightly against the stone. He didn't rush, didn't comment. He simply observed. The supports, the airflow, the placement of supplies, the goats. Then he stopped, right at the narrow passage. Atlas was already there, blocking him. Walter didn't step closer. He just looked into the darkness. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, quietly, "That's not natural." Ethan's jaw tightened. "What do you mean?" Walter kept his eyes forward. "There used to be structures out here. Before my time. Old mining roads, maybe something else. Most of it collapsed decades ago." He paused, but stone doesn't shift like that unless something was built behind it. Mara stepped closer now. "You're saying that passage goes somewhere?" Walter finally turned his head slightly. "I'm saying, I wouldn't assume it ends where you think it does." The cave felt colder after he said that. Walter didn't stay long after. He tipped his hat, gave Ethan one last look, the kind that carried warning without urgency, and left the way he came. Silence returned. But it wasn't the same silence. That night, Mara found the trail. She had been sitting near the goats, Luna curled beside her, when something caught the edge of her vision. A faint sheen on the stone floor. She stood, stepped closer, and saw it clearly. A thin line of wet mud stretching from the passage outward into the cave. Fresh. Still glistening. "Mara?" Ethan's voice was low behind her. She didn't turn. "Look." He stepped beside her, saw it. And this time, he didn't wait. The flashlight clicked on in his hand. Atlas moved immediately, positioning himself just ahead, body low, ears forward. Ethan stepped into the passage. The air changed, colder, damp. The walls narrowed around him, uneven rock pressing in on both sides. But then, his hand brushed against something different. Not rough, not natural. He paused, pressed harder. The surface shifted slightly under pressure. A seam. "Stay back," he said. Mara didn't argue. Ethan wedged his fingers into the narrow gap and pushed. The rock gave. Not a collapse, but a hidden break. An opening. Cold air rushed out, thick with moisture and the stale scent of something sealed for years. Atlas growled, low, uncertain. Ethan stepped through. The ground softened beneath his boots. Mud mixed with fine gravel. Water dripped somewhere ahead, slow and hollow. The space widened, not by much, but enough. He raised the flashlight. The beam cut through the dark and stopped. At the far end of the chamber, half sunken into wet earth, tilted and eaten by rust, stood something that did not belong to the mountain. Steel, a door. The wind changed first, not in sound, but in weight. By the time Ethan stepped outside that morning, the air felt sharper, thinner, as if the mountain itself had drawn a long breath and was holding it. The lake below had begun to seal over with a thin, glassy layer of ice. No birds crossed the sky. Even the trees seemed quieter. Ethan noticed everything. He always had. Years of operating in hostile environments had carved that instinct into him. Small shifts, subtle patterns, the kind of signs most people ignored until it was too late. This wasn't normal. This was warning. He stood there for a long moment, eyes scanning the ridge, jaw tightening slightly. Then he turned and went back inside without a word. After that, everything moved faster. He doubled the wood supply. Reinforced the entrance with an additional crossbar. Dug deeper trenches along the cave floor to prevent flooding when the snow melted. He began stacking dried grass and brush for the goats, organizing food stores with a precision that bordered on obsession. Mara saw it. The urgency, the silence, and the distance. At first, she said nothing. She worked beside him, cutting, carrying, feeding the goats. Luna stayed close to her, brushing lightly against her leg as she moved. Atlas grew even more restless, pacing between the cave entrance and the hidden passage, unable to settle. The cave felt smaller now, tighter, like something was pressing in from both sides. By the fourth day, Mara couldn't ignore it anymore. "You're preparing for something," she said. Ethan didn't look up. "I always prepare." "That's not what I mean." He kept working. She stepped closer. "What aren't you telling me?" The words hung in the air. Ethan stopped, just for a second, then continued stacking wood. "Nothing." Mara let out a short breath, something between a laugh and a break. "That's not true." Ethan turned then, finally facing her. His eyes were calm. Too calm. "You want me to say it?" she continued, her voice tightening. "Fine. That passage, the door. You think I didn't notice you going in there alone?" Silence. That was answer enough. Mara shook her head slowly, disbelief creeping into her expression. You're doing it again. Doing what? Deciding for both of us what we can handle. Ethan's jaw clenched. I'm trying to keep things stable. No, she said, her voice rising now, sharper. You're trying to control it, like you always do. The words hit harder than she expected, because they were true, and because they weren't the whole truth. Ethan took a step forward. And what are you doing? He shot back. Pretending this is normal? Pretending we can just build a life down here and everything goes away? Mara flinched, not from fear, from recognition. You think this is about pretending, she said quietly now, but her voice trembled beneath it. You think I don't know what we lost? Ethan didn't answer. Because he did. Every second of every day. I needed something to hold on to, she continued, her eyes burning now. Something alive, something I could keep from disappearing. Her hand rested unconsciously on Luna's back. The small goat pressed closer. And you? She added, looking straight at him. You won't even let me see what's right in front of us. The cave felt colder, even with the animals, even with the sealed walls. Ethan exhaled slowly. I didn't tell you because I don't know what it is, he said finally. And I'm not risking you walking into something we don't understand. Mara's expression hardened. I was in the same war as you. I know. Then stop treating me like I wasn't. That landed deep. Before Ethan could respond, Atlas snapped. The dog shot up from the ground, barking. Loud, sharp, urgent. Not the low warning growl from before, this was different. This was alarm. He ran straight toward the hidden passage. Mara and Ethan moved at the same time. No hesitation, no argument, only instinct. They reached the entrance together. Atlas stood just outside the opening, barking into the darkness, body tense, claws digging into the stone. Ethan raised the flashlight, the beam cut through the narrow gap, and stopped the steel door. It was open, not fully, just enough. A thin gap, darkness beyond it. Cold air poured out, thicker now, sharper, carrying the stale, suffocating smell of something that had been sealed for decades. Mara stepped closer. Ethan didn't stop her this time. They both stared into the opening. The light trembled slightly in Ethan's hand as he angled it deeper. What it revealed wasn't stone, not entirely. The walls beyond were straight, too straight. Edges where there should have been curves, surfaces that looked carved, reinforced, altered, man-made, old, forgotten, a structure buried inside the mountain. Mara's voice dropped to a whisper. This wasn't a cave. Ethan didn't answer, because now he knew she was right. The storm didn't arrive slowly. It struck. By the time the first real gust slammed into the mountainside, the sky had already turned a sick, muted gray. The wind came down the ridge like a living force, dragging ice and snow sideways across the landscape. Within hours, the lake vanished beneath a sheet of white. The path to the valley disappeared completely. Inside the cave, the sound was different. Muted. Distant. Like the world outside had been wrapped in something thick and suffocating. Ethan stood near the entrance, one hand pressed against the reinforced wooden door. He could feel the pressure of the wind through the structure, the vibration traveling through wood and stone. It's worse than I thought, he said quietly. Mara didn't answer. She was kneeling near the goats, her hands steady but her eyes distant. Luna pressed against her side, while the rest of the herd clustered tightly together, instinctively conserving heat. Atlas paced, back and forth, entrance, passage, entrance again. He couldn't settle. Neither could Ethan. The storm escalated through the night. Temperatures dropped fast, far below anything the town below could handle with wood and thin walls. Even without seeing it, Ethan knew what was happening out there, structures failing, heat escaping, people realizing too late that they had trusted the wrong kind of shelter. By the second night, the cave had grown warmer, but heavier. The air thickened with breath, moisture, animal heat. It was working, but only just. Then Atlas barked, not a warning. Not curiosity, urgency. He lunged toward the entrance, claws scraping hard against stone, body rigid with focus. Ethan moved instantly, lifting the crossbar and forcing the door open against the wind. The blast of air hit him like a physical strike, freezing, violent, blinding. Shapes stumbled through the white. Human shapes. He grabbed the first one and dragged him inside. The man collapsed immediately. Behind him came a woman, thin, shaking, barely able to stand. Then another, and another. Mara was already moving. No hesitation, no fear, only action. She knelt beside the first man, pulling off his gloves, checking his hands. Frostbite. Early, but dangerous. The man was in his early 40s with a gaunt face and hollow cheeks, his beard thin and uneven like it hadn't grown properly in weeks. His name came in broken breaths. Caleb. Rourke. His voice cracked, dry and strained. A man who had already been struggling before the storm ever came. The woman beside him was older, mid-50s, short and narrow-shouldered, her gray hair tied tightly at the back of her head despite the chaos. Her skin was pale, almost translucent with cold, but her eyes were sharp. Too sharp. The kind of sharp that came from surviving loss more than once. "Don't waste time on me," she said immediately, her voice rough but controlled. "Help the boy." Ethan turned. A teenager stood near the entrance, frozen in place. 16, maybe 17. Tall, but underfed, his limbs too long for his frame. His blonde hair was stiff with ice, his lips trembling uncontrollably. His name was Eli. He didn't speak, just stared. Ethan pulled him forward, inside, door shut, bar dropped. The cave shifted instantly, no longer quiet, no longer controlled. Now it was alive with sound, breathing, coughing, the restless movement of bodies packed too close together. More came. Over the next hour, Ethan opened the door again and again, dragging in whoever reached the cave before the storm swallowed them completely. Faces he didn't know, and some he did. People who had laughed, people who had whispered, now reduced to the same thing, survivors. The cave filled, too quickly. Heat rose, but so did something else, pressure. The air grew heavier with every added breath. Mara worked without stopping, wrapping hands, checking pulses, forcing warm goat's milk between chattering teeth. She didn't look at Ethan anymore. She didn't need to. They were operating on instinct again, the way they used to. Ethan moved through the crowd, assessing space, calculating numbers. Too many. Not enough oxygen, not enough food, not enough room. His eyes drifted toward the passage, toward the door. Still open, still waiting. Then, the mountain moved. A deep, thunderous crack echoed from outside, followed by a roar. Not wind, something heavier, faster. Ethan's head snapped toward the entrance. "Down!" he shouted. The impact hit seconds later. A violent force slammed into the mountainside, shaking the cave so hard dust rained from the ceiling. The wooden door shuddered under the pressure. Then everything went silent. Not calm. Dead. Ethan moved immediately, forcing the bar loose and pushing against the door. It didn't move. He pushed harder. Nothing. Snow. Packed solid. Buried. The realization settled slowly. Then all at once. No exit. No airflow from outside. No way back. Behind him, the cave was full. Too alive, and slowly running out of air. Ethan turned, his eyes locked onto Mara, then shifted. To the passage. To the steel door. Still open. Still breathing cold air into the cave. Not a shelter. Not yet. But maybe the only way forward. The cave was running out of time. You could feel it in the air. Each breath came thicker, heavier, as if the oxygen itself had weight now. The warmth that once felt like protection had turned suffocating. Too many bodies. Too little space. Too much fear pressing against stone. Ethan stood in the center of it all, scanning faces. Pale, exhausted. Waiting. For him. He had seen that look before. Men in war zones. Civilians in collapsing cities. People who didn't need hope. They needed direction. He turned toward Mara. No more distance, no more silence. "There's something behind that passage," he said, his voice steady but low. "A structure, a door. I didn't tell you because I didn't know what it was." Mara held his gaze. For a moment, everything else faded. The noise, the bodies, the storm buried above them. "Are you telling me now," she asked quietly, "because you trust me, or because you don't have a choice?" Ethan didn't look away. Both. That answer mattered. More than anything he had said in weeks. Mara stepped closer. Her face was still pale, still worn by everything they had lost, but there was something else now. Something steady. Something returning. "We don't get through this alone," she said. "Not anymore." Her hand found his. It wasn't hesitation. It was decision. Ethan nodded once, then turned. "Everyone listen," he called out, his voice cutting clean through the noise. "There's another section deeper inside this mountain. We're moving." Some faces froze. Others shifted with uncertainty, but no one argued. Because there was no other option. Atlas moved first, straight toward the passage. Ethan followed, pushing fully against the rusted steel door. He resisted for a second, then gave with a deep, grinding groan that echoed into the darkness beyond. The air that rushed out was colder, cleaner, a faint, distant flow. "Airway," Ethan muttered. "There's ventilation." They moved, slowly at first, then with urgency. The tunnel widened beyond the door, revealing something unmistakable now. Flat walls, reinforced edges, old support beams long rotted but still holding shape. This had once been built with purpose, a shelter, or something like it. Water dripped steadily along one side, feeding into a narrow channel that led deeper into the structure. The ground sloped slightly downward before opening into a larger chamber. There, a hidden reservoir. Clear water. Still, alive. Mara stepped forward, her breath catching slightly, not from fear this time, but recognition. "This place was meant to hold people," she said. Ethan nodded. Long time ago. Behind them, the group followed. Careful, quiet. Hope and fear tangled together. Ethan moved quickly, assessing the space. He directed the older survivors, like the sharp-eyed woman from earlier whose name he now caught as Ruth Calder, a former schoolteacher in her 60s with a spine still straight despite the years, to the driest section of the chamber. She didn't waste time. She began organizing people immediately, her voice calm, firm, someone used to being listened to. Mara took the children and the weakest, guiding them closer to the inner wall where the temperature held steady. Eli stayed near her, silent but responsive now, his eyes less distant, anchored by her presence. Atlas circled the perimeter once, then settled near the entrance of the chamber. Guarding. Always guarding. Ethan found the source of the airflow. A vertical shaft, narrow, unstable, but open. Cold air filtered down through it, faint, but enough. "Ventilation's weak," he said. "We need it stronger." Before anyone could respond, the mountain shifted. A low crack echoed above. Dust fell. The shaft trembled. Ethan didn't hesitate. "I'll clear it." He moved fast, climbing into the narrow space, bracing his weight against the stone. His hands worked quickly, pulling loose debris, widening the opening inch by inch. Below, Mara watched. Every movement, every risk. The shaft groaned, stone shifted. Then, a sharp fracture. Ethan slipped. Caught himself, but barely. A slab of rock jammed into place above him, trapping his upper body. The airflow choked instantly. The chamber below grew still. Too still. "Ethan!" Mara was already moving. No pause, no fear. She climbed after him, her movements precise, controlled, muscle memory from a life she had tried to bury. "You need to get out," he said, strained. "If this collapses—" "No," she cut him off. Her hands found the rock, tested it, measured it. "You always think you have to carry everything," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in the stone. "Not this time." She shifted her footing, adjusted her leverage, then pushed, not with panic, with precision. The rock moved, just enough. Ethan freed one arm, then the other. They worked together now. No rolls, no distance, no silence between them, just trust. The shaft opened wider. Air rushed down, cold, clean, alive. Below, the chamber stirred, people breathing easier, shoulders dropping, life returning inch by inch. Ethan dropped back down, landing hard but steady. Mara followed. For a moment, they just stood there, looking at each other. Not as survivors. Not as soldiers, but as two people who had finally chosen the same direction again. Days passed. The storm above raged, then weakened, then faded into silence. When light finally returned to the mountain, it didn't come through the buried entrance. It came from the far end of the structure. A narrow exit. Hidden. Ethan pushed it open. Snow fell away. Sunlight broke through. One by one, they stepped out. Ruth, Eli, Caleb, the others. The goats followed. Atlas ran ahead, powerful and sure, his body cutting through the snow like it belonged there. Ethan and Mara came last. Their hands still locked together. The mountain behind them was silent again. But something inside it had changed. And so had they. Sometimes, the miracle we're waiting for doesn't come as a sudden rescue. It comes as strength we didn't know we still had, as the courage to hold on one more moment. As the hand we almost let go of, but chose to hold again. Maybe God doesn't always remove the storm, but He shows us the way through it. He places people, signs, and even unexpected paths in front of us, and asks only one thing, that we trust and keep going. In our everyday lives, we all face our own storms. Loss, fear, loneliness, moments where everything feels like it's collapsing. But maybe, just maybe, there's always a door we haven't seen yet, a path we haven't dared to take, a miracle waiting quietly on the other side of faith. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to reflect. Who are you holding on to? And what are you still fighting for? Share this story with someone who might need hope today. Leave a comment and tell me what you believe a miracle really is. And don't forget to subscribe so we can keep sharing stories that remind us we're not alone. May God watch over you, guide you through every storm, and bless you with strength, peace, and unexpected miracles in your life.
The tale you just heard was created from imagination, but its meaning is rooted in real life. If this story moved you, please like the video and subscribe to One for More stories about courage and loyalty. Thank you.